What is the most statistically improbable thing to happen to you? When at college we had old style, plug-in phones in each of our rooms. Never used them. Didn't even know the number. One day mine rang. I picked it up and some old guy was asking for a Philip. I told him that. No. There wasn't a Philip here, but this old guy's voice sounded really familiar. Like really familiar. Like I was 90% sure. So I asked, "Grandpa? Insert grandpa's full name. Is that you?" Full stop. It was. Turns out he was trying to call an old friend. And had been pressing 2 instead of 5 when dialing the number, i.e. 2782 387 instead of 5785 387. And it happened to be the phone number to my room. I was telling my co-workers about an interesting customer of mine from a month before, who looked like a hobo but bought a very nice product and talked about his international travels. To remind them not to judge customers on appearances only. Right as I finished the story, he walked in to buy another identical one as backup. Cue a month or so later and I was telling the story again to a different coworker, with the update that he'd appeared as if summoned the last time. And yet again he walked in right on the heels of my story about him. To buy again. He's probably standing at the locked door of the closed store now since I told the story again. Opened a beer while sitting around a bonfire. Threw the cap in the fire and it bounced in the air off a log and landed on top of my friend's bear. We just froze. I don't even want to know the chances of making that happen again. I lost my wallet one night partying in Redondo Beach. About a month later I was sitting down on some big boulders that make up the breakwater again in Redondo and I looked down by my feet and there was my wallet. Sitting there waterlogged on one of the rocks. Nothing missing out of it. About a year later, the same wallet goes missing again. I'm like, WTF is going on? No idea. So a month later, I'm in a rando grocery store and the cashier sorta recognizes me and says, "Hey, stay right here." She goes over to an office and comes back with my wallet. Nothing missing. Had all my cash still there. My father and I are both airline pilots. Early one morning I am working a flight from Louisville to Detroit and he is going from Columbus to Chicago. It's quiet on the radios at that early hour when ATC calls out some traffic for us to look for. And us to another aircraft. When I hear my dad answer the radio. Shortly after that, he says hi to me. And I reply with, "Hi Dad." Then we passed directly over his aircraft by 1,000 feet. One of the coolest moments of my flying career to date. Follow up. Thanks for all the support. It means a lot to know people find it as cool as I did. It was a pretty significant moment for me because I was a little asshole when I was young and flying, and our shared love for aviation was what really made my dad and my relationship take off. Pun intended. I went to a small university in the Midwest. Less than 6,000 students. I bumped into an old classmate one day. On a train in southern Japan. Someone with multiple felonies as my same birthday to the year and first, middle and last name as well as the same eye color and height in my state. It makes all background checks a big pain in the ass as well as renewing any official documents like my driver's license. My friend and I were talking about an upperclassman in our gym class that had an ankle monitor on. And I mentioned that it seems like all he talks about is food and saying FCK. We both decided to pause for a second and eavesdrop on his conversation and all we heard was F King meatball sandwich. Definitely not the most statistically improbably thing to happen to me. I had a police helicopter light me up in my car with a spotlight and red and blue lights. Pulled over and waited for what I assumed was a SWAT team coming to get me. Waited 10 minutes and then the lights went off and it flew away. The statistically improbable part is that I was selling weed and had just made a drop. So I thought I was done for. Nope. Never found out why they lit me up. Damn, this is a boring shift. Hey, you know what'll be funny? I constantly and randomly win gaming systems. When the original PlayStation released, my grandpa was working at Best Buy. They had a Christmas party for employees and family where you could donate a decast car for a chance to win. I donated one and managed to win. PS2 came out and a local news channel was holding a giveaway. All you had to do to enter was send a card in with your information. Christmas was pretty cool that year too. When the XB360 released, they had one in one of the stacker games like you see in arcades. You know, the rigged ones that nobody wins on? Yeah. You guessed it. Happened on my cousin's birthday too. Finally. My XB won. Signed up online for a giveaway. I figured since the odds were so high against me, I should buy one. So I did. About 6 weeks later they held the drawing. And I'm now the proud owner of two XB1S. Yeah. Can't wait for the next gen consoles to release. TLDR. Haven't had to buy a game system since 1995 thanks to random drawings and contests. First day of 4th grade, a guy and I were confused because we both have the same name and last name. No middle name. Had to deal with that through elementary and middle school. He goes to the same college as me and back in the day we were pretty good friends. An annoying thing is that we'd get each other's papers, grades, test scores handed to each other. Just from habit I know his old school ID number to this day. As well as his birthday LMAO. Even a couple years back a guy sent me a message on FB saying that I'll be his roommate but I'll live at home. I immediately knew he was talking about the other guy and gave the other guy's account. I bought a family reunion t-shirt, not my family, at a thrift store outside Houston. 2 years later at Northwestern University outside Chicago I was wearing the shirt. And I ran into a guy in the dining hall wearing the same shirt. He was also not in the family. When I was in middle school my friend requested around 30 people with the same name as me. Only like 4 accepted, but around 6 or 7 years after that I was scrolling through Facebook and saw my name was tagged in something. The picture was at a basketball tournament I went to the previous weekend, but when I looked at the picture while I was on the other team's beach the person that was tagged was playing against us. The crazy part was we both traveled 500+ miles from different sides of the country to play in the same tournament on different teams in the same game and picture. And the only reason I saw the picture was I friended other people with the same name as me when I was 11. I run into the same Ukrainian guy every time I go to the Vegas airport. He was my roommate briefly in college and since then it's happened 3 times. The Vegas airport. Sigh. Okay. I'll be the one to say it. What are the odds? In 2012 I was mugged at gunpoint while walking home late at night. Lost my wallet and phone but fortunately was fine. Reported to police and never got my stuff back. No surprise. 4 years later I had moved 4,500 kilometers away and got a phone call from my sister. She was at a music festival and lost her ID. A guy camping next to her found it. Noticed the address on her driver's license. He recognized it because it was the same as the address of the fake ID he had been using. He had my ID from my wallet that had been stolen 4 years earlier. My sister handed him the phone and I was more amazed than anything. But I asked where he had got it from. And it sounded like it had been passed around a few people at the school he went to. I told him I didn't want it back. But asked him to promise to not give it to anyone else. And not to steal my identity. So far my identity hasn't been stolen. I sat behind some guy in physics that I have never once spoken to. One night he was in my dream for some reason. The next morning he turns around and says, I don't mean to sound weird but you were in my dream last night. This happened 11 years ago and I still can't believe it. I have 2 totally unrelated eye conditions. One of which affects about 0.04% of the population and the other that is somewhere between 1 and 5%. The one that affects the 0.04% triggers usually about 5 migraines per day. But I am super f***ing lucky that my migraines only present with visual symptoms. Not pain. Which is again fairly unusual. I found a shiny POC registered sign before they gave me any pokeballs. got 2 rare diseases in 1980. One of them had a 98% chance of death. Of the 2% who survived, 97% ended up in long-term care. I'm still on my own today. Pretty much functional. I went to a trade show. And a lot of the companies had bowls with drop in your business card to win. At the end of the day they gathered us all together to draw the prizes. And I won a laptop. An iPhone. A weekend in a resort. A year's subscription to MSDN and a carton of wine. After the first 2 wins people thought it was funny. Then there was playful teasing. But for the last couple I just got booed and people groaned a lot. A few people called out rigged. Etc. But as the announcer explained, it was multiple bowls from multiple companies. All brimming with business cards. Totally freaked me out. Felt like the Twilight Zone. My band were recording in a studio in the Suffolk countryside. It was a pretty remote place. Our singer had written a line in French, "We are all British," and after he went through his first vocal take of the song, the engineer asked if we were sure it was correct. We looked at each other suddenly and sure that we'd translated it correctly. At that exact moment there was a knock on the door and it was the engineer's French friend who he hasn't seen for a couple of years. He just popped by to say hello. He joked that he just appears whenever someone is getting French wrong. Which, as it turns out, we were. Was visiting my grandma as a kid. We decided last minute we'd go eat first. Then go to the museum. As a result, I was the 1000th person to enter the museum. Got my picture in the paper and a free t-shirt. I'm only guessing. But I'm willing to bet you weren't the exact 1000th person. But the one who was a child at around 1000. Pictures of a child at a museum in the paper are nice and wholesome. Man. I've had 2 different birds tea on me on my way to school one morning. I was once dealt a royal flush pat. Only 5 cards were dealt. I grew up in North London and my primary school had 18 people in each year. Went to Uganda when I was 19. We decided to check out a local bar in Ginger. Out of the way to play some pool and have a beer. Bumped into a guy I went to primary school with. I'm super late. But one I can finally answer. I was born on my dad's 23rd birthday at the exact same time he was born. 11:22 p.m. How old were you when you were born? If you were 23 as well. Man, that's crazy. I knew someone who was at the Bataclan massacre in Paris, France. For those who don't know, on the 13th of November 2015 a concert was taking place and a few gunmen entered and killed loads of people. She became totally agoraphobic and would not leave her house. One day her friends tried to convince her to go on a trip with them to London. They succeeded, but at the last moment she cancelled. She got too scared. So her friends went to London and were present at the London Bridge attack on the 3rd of June 2017. Of course it simply solidified her agoraphobia and now she basically never leaves her place. Maybe 10 years ago I was playing tennis with my brother on vacation at the hotel. We had never played before and were bad. So we were just messing around. My brother decided to swing as hard as he could at one of the balls and hit it straight up. It must have been almost 200 feet in the air. Thanks for the mathing help. There was an 8-year-old kid we knew lying down reading or something on the grass outside of the fence. And the ball came straight down and hit him squarely in the testicles. Walked into a casino and registered for their players club for $10 so they'd waive my $10 entry fee for anyone not in the players club. Which is what everyone does. After an hour or so they called my name over the PA system and summoned me to an area where they were doing a promotion. They handed me 5 big oversized dice and told me if I rolled a Yahtzee I'd win $500. Took all my friends out to dinner that night. At an arcade in 8th grade. I managed to win the Crane prize. Which was a cup with 5,000 tickets. Tell my friends. They asked me to show them how I did it. So I play again to demonstrate. And picked up another 5,000 tickets. On the same day. I also won the jackpot on the game where the light goes through all the bulbs and you have to stop it on a certain one. Twice. I went home with 2 wicked lava lamps and a shitty load of candy. Walking home one night. Alone. I saw a large meteorite scorching across the sky, leaving a fairly fiery trail and ending in a greenish light. Probably the most amazing thing I had seen. Then, years later out in the Scottish hills, I was on my own again. And suddenly the sky lit up, and when I looked up there was this massive trail being scored across the sky. As it went towards the opposite horizon it went behind clouds and lit them up. All the while the ground around me looked like someone had set off a massive flare. It is hard to explain to people just how bright it was without sounding like I am exaggerating. My biological dad got a vasectomy about 3 years before I was born. Failure rate on those is less than 1%, so I'd say that my being born was pretty improbable. About 2 years ago, when fantasy football was super obnoxious and everywhere, I was deep into it with some friends. Little over halfway through the season I wasn't really winning anything, so I stopped meeting up with my friends and strategizing with them. But I kinda kept playing. Then one week I forgot to do any lineups. It was like 4 in the morning. I was so tired, but something made me do a couple quarter lineups, just a couple. Woke up to take my girlfriend to work and was in second place. I won 500 off a quarter. I had a bright orange bike. Pretty old and rusty. That got stolen. Month later. Well, after I moved out. I looked at the window and saw it outside. I went to check if it was mine, as I couldn't truly believe it. And sure enough, the locker's code was my birth date. I moved out again, twice, and I'm still waiting for my bike to appear in front of my house by magic. 10-15 years ago or so, my uncle had a bike stolen from him. He had put a band-aid on the frame before he lost it. A handful of years later he was standing at an intersection and bumped into a guy with the same bike. My uncle spotted the band-aid and started to talk to the guy. Uncle. Nice bike. Guy. Thanks. Uncle. You know, I had one just like this. The guy dropped it and ran. My then girlfriend and me went on holiday. Camping in the south of France. Our next door neighbor, house to the right of us, was already camping somewhere in France for a couple days. We drove all day to the coast. Tried find a campground in the dark. Found it. Put up our tent and climbed in for a good rest. Next morning we woke up to the sound of our neighbor from home calling us for coffee. Her tent was directly next to us. On the right side. We drove 1,000 kilometers, 550-ish miles, to end up next to our neighbor. Lightning struck in between me and my ex one day on a hike. We were only like 3 feet apart. I met a stranger in Tokyo who had spent time in detention in high school. The woman who ran that detention? My mom. I met a stranger in Tokyo who knew my mom from a small town in Idaho. I've been stung by bees only twice in my entire life. Both times on my birthday. But both incidents were about 20 years apart from each other. Happy birthday. There was a guy in my class in university who had the exact same name as me. My surname isn't so common in this country. But he looked the total opposite of me. Red hair. Pale skin. Light eyes. Taller. I have brown hair. Olive skin. Hazel eyes and just average height. We both thought it was cool that we had the same name because we'd never met another person with it and got talking. Then we discovered we had the exact same birthday. Day, month, year. Was really trippy and we both thought we were messing with each other until IDs were produced. After I graduated from high school in California, my parents took me on a 3-week trip across Germany, France and Switzerland as a graduation present instead of going on the trip organized by my high school. On the last day, we stopped in the town of Heidelberg before heading to the airport in Frankfurt to explore the town. It was there where I ran into my high school's Europe trip. I was able to reconnect with many acquaintances whom I thought I would never run into again. It was at that moment I realized just how small the world really was. Edit. To shed some light on this, my high school had an optional post-graduation Europe trip which was ridiculously expensive. At the time my father's company had him in Europe quite a bit for work. He managed to use this to his advantage to turn it into a work personal trip and invited me and my mother to tag along. It ended up being a fantastic trip and considerably less expensive in the long run. Once as a server I grabbed a handful of forks, a handful of knives and a handful of napkins to roll together. I randomly grabbed the same number of each item. Was it one of each?